Hello. I am doing today's Q&A on Playspaces, and in particular, my places, past and future. Currently, I do play out of one place, but it is shared, and so I don't consider it entirely mine. But you have been asking me questions over the last 24 hours, and I will be answering the ones only in the little question box. You can add to it using the question button just down there. But I have a lot already, so only add it if it's very good, please. Okay. This is a slightly diverse one. Is there a difference in style between play spaces in Asia, Europe, and America? So these are all very, very wide, large areas. Asia, I would say the most developed spaces that I've been in across the board would probably be in Japan. There's a lot of variety, there's a lot of equipment, there's a lot of specific things that are explored in different places, so the particularities can get quite detailed. The rest of Asia, things are not as open or explored, and so there are a lot of private spaces that you can't hire, that you would need to know somebody, and they are sometimes very developed but very underground. And then in Europe, I think my favorite spaces that I've found so far are in Germany. Just the things such as a lot of proper rigging for suspension and heavier bondage chairs and things like this tends to come out of Germany. But there are all sorts of play spaces in all sorts of cities everywhere. And in America, the diversity is quite wide, and there are some very developed spaces, and I would say it probably sits in between Europe and Asia in terms of accessibility. So I think those are the major differences that come to me. But in terms of style, I think that it really mostly depends on person to person in terms of who is executing it. It's going to reflect very much upon their aesthetics and their interests, and that actually changes a lot within cities, towns, let alone continents. So that's my take on that. Okay, just connected to this, as you're well traveled, what play spaces have you tried and loved, and why? Are there any spaces you still want to try? The one that I play out of in New York is gotta be one of the most cozy spaces that I enjoy, because it has all the equipment that aligns with what I enjoy to play within. This is owned by somebody else, however. It's just very kindly shared with me. And it has a special place in my heart because it's very intimate in a sense. I loved what is now gone, Residence Avalon in Berlin. And even though the aesthetic wasn't exactly what I would choose for my own personal space, I just loved that it had such variation in terms of the prisons downstairs, the CCTV that was available, the grand hall, the party room, the school room, the medical room. So there was just a lot in one space. And it also has a very domestic area to just chill and stay overnight, and there's a kitchen. It's just a really private, on the water kind of a spot. It was such a nice little holiday getaway for me, and it's a shame that it's gone now. Are there spaces I want to try? I do want to try some castles that I know of in Eastern Europe that are fully dedicated to my aspect of the practice, and I have heard different things about how they are run, but I'm still very curious. I won't mention it on here because it might get me in trouble. But that's kind of the place that I think is kind of near the top of my list in terms of what I've been thinking about trying. So, this next one is probably by a private individual. It says, where have you and do you draw inspiration from when creating a play space? I have to say I've been quite consistent in terms of what I enjoy for a few years now, and I have a very drawn out idea. in terms of what I like. And this starts from the before they get to my front door and to the moment that they are let back into the world. I have a little bit of a narrative that I enjoy exploring. And even though the things in between don't look exact, there's a feeling that I enjoy instigating. And for that to happen, I have very distinct ideas on how I like my area to be, how I like the front door to feel, how I like that first entry to be, and then so on and so forth. And so it probably relies a lot on feeling in terms of how I like to design my spaces. At the moment, I'm thinking of buying a basement in a small one in London and kitting it out very luxuriously and for it to be my private space. And then I'll see how that goes, and then I might start to work on a bigger thing in London later down the line. But what I used to have here in Bali was a space that was designed with that entry in mind, with the difficulty of entering in mind, with the humiliation of stripping down in mind. And I had a lot of glass walls. I had hidden things in walls so that you could immobilize people within them. I had a little tea bondage area because I love to do tea ceremony, where I also integrated it with bondage, and I could have my ceremony with people all tied up, restrained within the table itself. So everything is designed around how I live my life, my interests, and they include things like the tea, things like the restraint, things like a lot of proper rigging, a lot of hidden things, a lot of restraints that are possible when I just go about my day-to-day, because I live more in the lifestyle than just the play, as well as a lot of surfaces that are easy to clean and that are not too porous for the things that may come upon them. So that's how I tend to approach things. In terms of the aesthetic, I do have a very special place in my heart for the metals and the coldness and the rubber. But in terms of a livability, I don't mind adding a lot of very lush and comfortable fabrics and the odd carpet to kind of break it up a little bit also. I also really love cells, prison cells, and so, but they tend to look more modern rather than too authentic. I mean, they're authentic in that they hold, but they're not necessarily as rough looking designer. Okay. And yeah, there's somebody was asking whether I designed how I feel, how I want to feel in the space, or how I want another to feel. That's a good question, actually, because I definitely design for how I want people to feel, and how they feel falls back upon how I feel. That's kind of how the nature of all of this goes. I think in terms of how it sits when I'm there alone, I think just for it to be beautiful, for it to have art that are from my friends, that are to do with the genre, as well as to have very good quality fabrics and hard surface. Just I am very sensitive to how good quality the tactility of the world around me is, and so I think that would have to be good, just because it would annoy me if that were not the case. And that's kind of how those two things probably meet. So do you build around an idea or more around the gear and furniture you have for it? So I don't bother getting gear or furniture that is not going to meet my interests. And actually, I kind of don't really care keeping things in storage, which is maybe not such a good way to think about it, because I have a lot of storage spaces. But I definitely let a space inspire me if it's not built from the ground up. Whereas if it's built from the ground up, then obviously there's a lot more you can do. So I don't feel constrained by either. If I ever found like a standout piece, like maybe a standout, I've been wanting to make the tea bondage thing, which was integrated into an alcove before. I've been wanting to make a standalone one. I guess I would probably design with that in mind because that is quite dear to me. But I haven't found that piece that I would bother designing around yet. Yeah. Oh, this is nice. I like this one. What's your creative process like when coming up with the flow vibe pieces of your space? I've done this a few times now. So I have a huge, very organized set of folders with a lot of references. And at this stage, I know what I like in terms of the things I've already mentioned many times already. And so it's quite easeful. How was it at the beginning? I guess I walked my architects through a session, just verbally. And they kind of worked with that, and I tweaked a lot of things, and I gave them a lot of reference images. But I think that it's much easier to design a space when you are very aware of what you're interested in. And the other day I asked a lot of you what you were interested in, and that was less for me because I'm going to have my personal space, but that was more for a project that I'm thinking about joining. There's some people who would like to open a play space in Bali just for people to rent, and that was more for that. So that was interesting to hear about what your interests are and help to develop my thinking around that, because I understand that I'm very particular. And so to keep an open mind and to understand what you want, I asked you. So thank you very much for that. So that kind of covers my process that has happened, and I'm sure a lot of the other things that I've already shared probably. This is maybe a similar kind of question. It's also written by somebody who has a private account. I think they're saying, is there a theme, a feeling, a look you're going for in your play spaces that you try to bring out? No, I think it's just about something that's aesthetically and tactfully, like tactile, more soothing, interesting for me. And I do have a submissive journey in my head in terms of what I want them to feel, what I want them to see, and how I want all that to happen. But that will require a much larger space, and so I need to think about that further down the line. But in general, a lot of you have been asking me questions and distracting me. So that was about the theme. So the theme is, so I don't really think about theme. I think about interests, my interests, and my interests are emotion and some physicality, and I design around that. What you would think, I guess. I've worked out of spaces before, like when I first started in the dungeons, and there was the red dungeon, and there was the brass dungeon, there was the medical room, and there was the sissy wardrobe, and then there was I can't say that I think that way or I experience things that way, and so I don't really see those specific things in my ideal space. However, I totally understand how in an environment where you're serving a lot of people, that could be a good idea. But I don't really have a theme. My theme is me. Yeah. Okay. That's lots of questions. Lots of questions. I'm quite surprised, actually, because I didn't expect all of you to be so engaged with this one. Usually you like more kink-specific things. So today we're answering questions about play spaces. For those of you who are asking me irrelevant questions, for people looking to incorporate play space into a home, what are some of the things you love to see? I think this is going to be very different from person to person. For me, I've always had play space elements in my home for a few years now, and I always love to have restraints everywhere. Like every little corner, next to the sofa, like as part of the sofa, in tables, under tables. I make as many surfaces glass as possible so that I can have cages underneath integrated into the legs. And then I also like hidden away things, so like a little compartment in the kitchen and like restraint. So restraint's a big feature for me, and also I like to be entertained by having objects, so to speak, so objectification. And so I do a lot of like things in walls, like restraints in walls, so that you can make them look kind of like art pieces. I have some rigging with like cages, so that they can like kind of be strung up, kind of like a little bird cage accessory during dinner, things like this. So that's how I enjoy things to be integrated into my home. But this is going to be very dependent upon what you are interested in. Yeah. I guess maybe just a tip, like for somebody who isn't necessarily me, everybody does enjoy, a lot of people really enjoy restraints to a certain extent. So I would say you can get a lot of things that kind of lie flush into the ground, that kind of pop up, that turn into a restraint point. So things that are like hidden or that could be utilized as two things. Did I have lipstick on there? That have two things could be very, very useful. So that's a little maybe more generalized tip. Have you ever had maids, as in sissy maids? It's also from a private person asking this. To keep your space tidy and make your life easier. I don't have people who clean while I'm there, sometimes directly after play. However, I've had people who are very kind and obedient and thorough, who have been very helpful over the years. But it's very hard to find very particular people, because I'm very particular in terms of how I like my space and how I like the cleanliness level to be. So I'm going to block them because I don't like what they just said, and I'm going to block them from everything I'm ever going to create. There we go. And so, yes, it's very difficult to find very good people who are able to clean to the level that I wish. So that's only really happened once. So I don't think it's quite necessarily the fantasy that maybe you're looking at. So that's the practicality of it. I do entertain that when it's during play, but to be frank, it's really not very useful outside of it. So we've covered a few things from private people who I can't post. What makes a great play space for me? What do I look for? I think I've already covered that in a lot of ways, right? But anything in addition, if it's not mine and like I'm hiring it, I guess for the process to be really straightforward and for it to be available. So one of my favorite spaces, this is going to be a little bit of a complaint, one of my favorite spaces to book in London has a great booking system, but it's always fully booked. And then like on the last minute, a day or two, and I can't do last minute things. A lot of things come up, so a lot of people cancel because they have this cancellation policy, and I think they should just charge a hell of a lot more. So that people don't do that, or they keep the deposit or something like this, so anyway, so that's something more practical. But let's see, people asking for Cash App, as if I'm going to tell you here. So curious what happened to your Bali play space. So my past one, it was my home, and I started traveling again after COVID, and I realized that most of my friends, people I connected with, were overseas, especially in London, and so I got that house packed up, and I reprioritized my life. So that's what happened to that. But in terms of Bali, I might still go in on a play space here, depending on how that pans out. Somebody's asking about London. Yes, I'll be opening something, but it will be private and quite small to start with. Maybe when I do something much larger, I'll consider opening it up to people. So how much does it cost to set up a play space, and is the submissive expected to contribute to the cost? Are you talking about you? I don't know who asked this, but it could be as basic as you like. So I think this is going to vary a lot, or it could be totally from the ground up, which I've done before, but it, in Indonesia, so it's more affordable, so it really depends on what you're looking for in your budget. It could just be a corner of your bedroom, and it could require a sling, which is maybe a few hundred. So I think it really depends. is a submissive expected to contribute? That really depends on who you're in relationship with and what you've come to an agreement about. I cannot answer that for you. But in terms of who has funded mine, yes, a partner has funded mine before. I have funded mine. The next one will also be on me, but obviously courtesy of all the things that have been given to me over the times. Am I moving to London? Yes, I've been there a lot lately also. Let's see. I like how a lot of you are asking about my hobbies. Oh, so maybe, here we go. This is the last relevant question. Other than that, everybody's been asking questions about ridiculous things. So, do I prefer a simple play space or a dungeon for my personal needs? Personal needs, I think it varies. I think in terms of the space that I'm going to have, I've already described it towards the beginning of this video, but I go through small mood changes. I would definitely sit more in I definitely want rigging at least, even if it's a very domestic looking space. But I might be in the mood, especially like a party sort of mood, where everything is very harsh and hard, and there are proper like cells that people can be thrown into. So it depends where my mood sits. But because it's a part of my life, I tend to have much more luxurious domestic space that has very good functionality. So that's kind of where I sit with things. So I will check to see if there's anything else that might be to do with the topic of today, which is Playspaces. And this is a very simple question. What next? I've already sort of answered that. What's next for me definitely is a personal space in London. Hopefully a basement. If you're selling one, please let me know. In central London. And then maybe in a couple of years, I will think about doing a much larger space. Yeah. I wonder how many square meters that I would need for that. Maybe 100 or so plus, maybe 150. But that'll just be in a couple of years. First, I want to focus on a small, intimate space for me to feel comfortable in for now. And then I'm open to ideas and suggestions. I have a friend here who would like to open, here in Bali, who would like to open a play space to rent to others. And I'm open to joining in on that idea. I've given them some of my thoughts already, but we'll see how that pans out because I'm not really based here anymore. But that's kind of what I think in terms of play spaces, in terms of what's next. But in my life, a lot of other things are happening. If you're aware of me on other channels, then maybe you've been updated. So thank you very much for joining me. And I'm off. And have a lovely afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. And I will catch you on my next Q&A. Let's see. Did anybody else ask a relevant question? No. So I'm off. Bye. Thank you.